Welcome back to Highly Successful Couples. I'm your host, Nick Solaczek, and today I'm joined by my partner, Alissa Hansen, to chat with Deej, who's the co-director of the Institute of Somatic Sexology in Australia. He has 20 years of experience, tons of certifications, and we think that he can provide a lot of insight into conversation around sex, relationships, especially long-term relationships, desire, arousal, and a number of other subjects that we're going to touch on. So if you want to learn about sex, you want to bring more pleasure into your life, you want to understand about something about somatic sexology, this could be the interview to listen to. So Deej, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Something that people might be wondering is they've heard this word somatic, or maybe they've been told that they should see a somatic therapist by their ex-partner, but they don't know what somatic means. And maybe you could shed some light on that for us so we can better understand that phrase.
Yeah, somatic is what we're experiencing through the body, our experience of being alive in the body on the planet. So cognitive describes all our thinking capacities, narrative describes all our speaking capacities, somatic describes all our feeling capacities. And it's been a piece missing from a lot of education, a lot of counseling, a lot of psychotherapy, a lot of different modalities, because the Western world is focused on thinking and speaking and prioritize those as our areas of research, until relatively recently, where the somatic movement is bringing up what the body is experiencing to work with what we're thinking and what we're saying.
And is there often a big difference between, what someone's experiencing in their body and what cognitively they're experiencing?
When the two aren't working together, we're often out of sync with our authenticity, with what we really want, right? So if I'm basing what I want from my partner, for example, on only what I'm thinking, there's often going to be a dissonance with what I'm feeling. So somatic work helps people drop into the feeling aspect so we can get what I'm feeling into alignment with what I'm thinking and what I'm saying. And then it's more likely to be real, because the body is the part of us that's grounded in the present moment. It's the part of us that's living in the world, whereas our minds can and do go everywhere. They're very powerful and very wonderful, and we can hypothesize and imagine and speculate and all kinds of wonderful things. But when we do that without grounding it into what we're experiencing in the present moment, it can get too hypothetical. So by bringing in the somatic aspect, we're bringing it into something that is actually real and here and now.
And so as we're talking about that experience of life, there's so many things, everything we experience, we could talk about it, our relationship of experiencing that through the body. Specific to your work with sexology, what are some common challenges you're seeing in the world, or common themes that you're seeing maybe in your private practice or with your students or in workshops that you teach? Are there common challenges that people are coming in with that relate to this maybe this split between being so heady and actually being able to sense what we're feeling, or actually being able to ground in the present moment?
Where do I begin on that one? Lots of things that, because we've gone a step further in some ways from being, all in our heads to being all online. The awareness has moved from the body. Maybe it didn't happen temporarily in this order, but there has been in the last, few hundred years a focus on being all in our heads. And now we're taking that further out into being on screens and online. So particularly when it comes to sex, for the first time in the history of our species, people are learning about sex through what they're seeing on the screen. Yeah, people are learning about sex through pornography and primarily. And that, as well as a culture that focuses on doing and production and being busy, means that everything's sped up. So one of the major challenges that clients come with around sex is we haven't learned to regulate, and people have learned to do things very quickly, and people have learned a lot of people have learned that sex is an upregulated, a fast activity, and when we're doing something quickly, it's using that sympathetic part of the nervous system. Let me know if you want me to explain any terms, but there's a part of the nervous system that deals with excitement, with busyness, with upregulation, and without learning to regulate, we're only using part of our feeling stuff. We're only using a part of the nervous system. And by learning to regulate, by learning to move through fast, exciting activities and socially engaged activities and down-regulated activities, we wake up more of the body, we wake up more of the nervous system, we wake up more of our pleasure potential. So with that fastness, there are a lot of sexual issues. So early ejaculation, erectile difficulty, even pelvic pain. Part of that is because people are moving very quickly and aren't paying attention to what the body needs while they're moving quickly.
So there's a number of things you touched on there in terms of this slowness. We're moving really fast in the world. We move really fast through sex. Maybe we learn through pornography that sex is supposed to move very fast. Or we learn that maybe one partner's pleasure is more of a priority, or that men need this or women need that. We can get some illusions about what's true, what actually happens in reality, and especially what happens when we're not high on our own neurochemicals in the honeymoon phase of relationship.
Yeah.
Are there any bullet points here in terms of, is there something that pornography teaches us that's helpful? Or I hear a lot about harms. I hear a lot about risks. I hear people struggle maybe with addiction to pornography, or wondering if it's something that should have a place in their life at all from a neuroscientific perspective or ethics, or, a number of the issues that people can have.
Yeah. Look, I think on the positive side, for a lot of people, pornography helps us normalize pleasure and helps people to a degree, depending on what they're watching, move through shame. And so there's been a real shift in, the Institute of Somatic Sexology started in 2010, and I came from a psychotherapy world into the somatic sexology world. Back then, almost no one knew what the word somatic meant. And when I spoke with people from the psych world, they often giggled about what I was doing. But there's been a real shift in the, how long has it been? 15 years. In that 15 years, and that for a number of reasons. One is the advances of neuroscience and the money being spent on research into trauma is showing that if you want to support people living with trauma in really moving through it and making a difference in their lives, you have to also work through the body. So there's getting there's that kind of scientific data to show that somatic work is important. And at the same time, and I think in part at least because of pornography, people are talking about sex more. And so, for example, my GP, I don't know what you call it in Canada, the general practitioner, the general doctor you go to, they've had almost no training in sex or sexual issues, but their clients are bringing their sex lives to their GPs, to their psychologists, to their psychotherapists, to their friends a lot more than they used to be. So things have really shifted. And also with media, for example, a lot of media is interested in speaking to people who know something about sex, whereas 10, 15 years ago, most of the outreach from media was much more sensationalized than it is today. So things are, sex has been taken more seriously, and I never think it's the one thing that causes something, but I certainly think that people having more exposure to sex from pornography is a part of that shift.
Alissa, do you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah. I was curious, Deej, I know, Nick, you just kind of mentioned maybe some not so useful things about porn, but I would love to hear, Deej, some of your thoughts on what's not useful with pornography from your modality or world.
One that I've mentioned is that, like, and porn is, if you look at 1970s porn versus modern porn, it's interesting because things have changed. Like porn in 1970s, there was much more variety in everything. There was a more variety in body shape. There was more variety in body hair. There was certainly more variety in tempo and moving towards and moving away. And so it's interesting to look at the history of porn and how it's changed. So it is much more, in general, there's a lot of stuff out there, but in general, it's faster. Bodies are similar. There's not much body hair, all those kinds of things. So there's that fastness that's come out of it. But I think one of the main challenges for people is that porn can be disembodying. Yes, because the erotic focus when we're watching porn is not necessarily in our own bodies and on the incredibly wide, nuanced sensations and that are happening in the body. It's out there on the screen, and the body is what the body practices. We learn through what we practice, and when people are watching porn regularly, that's a practice. So you're teaching the body through the porn watching. And if you're doing it in a way where your focus is all in what you're watching, rather than coming back to what you're experiencing, what you're feeling in the body, it leads to a greater degree of disembodiment, which can make it harder to connect with one's own body and connect with other people's bodies, because in connecting with other people's bodies, it's not just what we're seeing or what we're saying, until the shift to the focus being online, both with eroticism and also communication. Back when I was first at uni, they said 75% of communication between humans is nonverbal. I wonder about that now, right? Because most of our communication is typed, so we're missing and we're not learning all of those somatic or nonverbal cues and pieces of communication that inform us about our connections to the world, our connections to other people, what we want, what other people want. So there's a big missing piece, but it's about, like with most things, it's learning to use things usefully. So if people are using porn more like a sex toy rather than the whole sexual event, something that they can tap into to get a bit of charge, get a bit of activation, get a bit of stimulation, and then moving away from the porn, getting their focus back in their pleasure, back in their bodies, back in their experience, that can be useful. But without guidance, people aren't usually doing that.
If someone has the entirety of their sexual experience connected through pornography, in that whether they're single or they're partnered, that they have a large focus on pornography, they maybe are having a lot of solo experiences, maybe they feel desire discrepancy with their partner, or they feel stuck in terms of the sexual connection, initiation, so in adult life, sometimes the logistics of making things happen. Where could somebody start? Because I'm hearing you describing someone who might be in a situation where they have an opportunity to have an experience of more pleasure, more connection with their own body, more connection with a partner or their partner. Where might someone start if they feel that their sexual experience is just purely in their genitals? They don't feel anything or have sensation in other places of the body, or they don't have an orientation to that. Like, as you were speaking, that was one thing I'm thinking is like, oh yeah, like just thinking of sex is like, yeah, it's just genitals, and I don't feel it anywhere else in my body, and I don't have any other sensation or connection that I'm thinking about, focused on, or aware of.
Yeah, well, that's where you start, by coming back to the body.
Yeah.
And coming back to embracing variety and curiosity are really the keys. As you said, sex can become an exclusively genital experience, excluding the rest of the body. So, and we learn that through practice. So by bringing in practices that include the whole body and don't exclude the genitals, for example, is one way to start to wake up the nerve fibers. We literally, the nerve fibers, when we're not using them, are just not very active. They're not very awake. But through practices of waking up the hands, waking up the body, feeling for arousal, not just in the genitals, but in other parts of the body starts to wake up. Nerves start to wake up, and we get more sensation. We can and we can access more pleasure, and we do it through practice. We learn everything in the body through practice. So what we've learned that doesn't serve us, we've learned through practice. We just didn't realize we were practicing. We were just doing things over and over. So by bringing in intentional practices, and this is where somatic sexology, it's very informed by kind of Eastern philosophies, which have focused on meditation and yoga and intentional practices for thousands of years. And the neuroscience advances in the last 3 decades have given the scientific support for the fact that intentional practices, neuroplasticity, is a thing. Like the body does grow and change according to what we do and where we place our awareness. So now that we've got the scientific evidence for that, Western folk can get more on board with it. And this is why there is a shift towards somatic work, and all kinds of people and schools and practitioners that are teaching people how to use our bodies intentionally in order to be able to access more of what we want.
Something that comes up for me as you're sharing is this idea that if we want to lose weight or we want to gain muscle, we might expect that there's something that needs to change in our daily habit or our routine. We might have to make an effort in some way and apply ourselves.
Yeah.
And when it comes to our sex life, we just want it to happen. We just want it to be amazing. We want it to be easy and to flow.
Yeah.
And we feel a lot of shame sometimes, frustration, personal suffering in different ways about that experience when, we married this person that we love and we do want to be with them forever, but we've got this maybe lack of desire, or we have desire discrepancy. And I realize that those can be two different things. How would you work with a couple? Where might you start with a long-term couple who has desire discrepancy and maybe feeling even a lack of arousal at all?
There are many things to support the people in developing awareness around. One is like you're speaking to. There are a number of sexual myths that really get in the way of pleasure and get in the way of long-term pleasure. So in long-term relationships, without bringing some focus to it, discrepancies in desire are almost inevitable. And they're inevitable for lots of reasons. One is communication. Most adults, when it comes to our bodies and sex, live in a cone of silence. There's all the stuff I want, but I don't find my words. I don't find my words to describe what I want. And part of that is the myth that sex is just supposed to just be magically great. It's just supposed to happen. And part of that myth is when we first meet each other and it's all new and that really attraction and all the biochemistry of the newness is there, often it is just magic. And it does just happen. But once that limerancy biochemistry settles down and there are two unique people with really different ways of being in the world, different arousal patterns, different turn-ons, what in the early days was really exciting, oh wow, you're really different, that's really hot, becomes, oh, you're really different, that's a real pain in the ass. You're really different, but we're still not using our words about it. So it's supporting people in starting to communicate. we mentioned at the beginning how important it is to it's not just about what you say and what you think, that if you're going to get to authenticity around communication and consent, you've got to actually tap into what the body wants. And another huge sexual myth, I think, which relates, I mean, we could talk about this topic for days, but another huge sexual myth that is relevant here is the myth that somebody else is responsible for my pleasure. Yeah, I am responsible for my pleasure, you're responsible for your pleasure. And once we really integrate that, we can really support each other in accessing pleasure. But while I assume that someone else is responsible for my pleasure, and I'm not really finding my words, I'm frustrated because I'm not getting what I want. And I think, for most of us, if we think about it, working out what I want erotically and in terms of pleasure is complex and a lifetime endeavor. And it's not an easy task. Imagining someone else can work it out is an impossibility.
Yeah, because they can't read our mind.
Because they can't read our minds, and even our own minds don't necessarily know what we want if we're not tapping into the body and what actually turns it on and kind of clarifying it and moving through our shame and working out what the pathways to pleasure are and what they could be.
I have, just echoing that from a personal standpoint, I find that my journey of like understanding my eroticism and like what my turn-ons are, what my erotic template is, I thought would be this like easy, like, oh, I'm just going to do a little inquiry and yeah, I'll get it. No, I feel like I have been in deep inquiry with it and I still feel sort of confused because I feel like it's just tied to a lot of parts of us, right? Potentially parts that go all the way back to childhood, potentially. And, I love being on this self-discovery. And I think it's something really interesting that we all can do. And like you said, Deej, and we have this information, we then are more empowered to share that information with our partner and there's more understanding around what's interesting, what's hot, what's exciting, what we like. And I guess I just have found that to be a really fulfilling journey to be on, even though I still feel kind of confused and don't really understand myself. But
well, part of that is because our experience is emerging. It's not fixed. It's not where it was 10 years ago. It's not where it was 5 years ago. It's not even where it was if we're doing some work and we're exploring and we're learning. And it's not even where it was, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Our experience is emerging. The possibilities are kind of endless. Yet we're so I think part of it is that it's easy to imagine, what am I as an erotic being as kind of a fixed idea, whereas it's an emerging process. And, and so back to what you were asking, Nick, before, one of the big things is that we've got person A and person B. They're not the same. They're different. And that's exciting because those differences, whether it's in sex or any other part of a relationship, differences are your learning opportunities. And I feel that, at least in part, we come into a relationship because it gives us vibrant opportunities to learn and grow. And we're going to get to places in all aspects of a relationship, but certainly in sex, of where we get to roadblocks. And we've got three main choices when we get to a roadblock. We can stay blocked. And people do choose to do that for long periods of time. We can leave the relationship and go and have a go at finding what we want elsewhere, or we can learn and we can grow, and from that learning and growth, there's newness. There's more variety, there's more curiosity, and there are more pathways to pleasure.
When you were speaking about patterns from the past, things that we grew up with, maybe even just the subject of shame, one of the things that I really relate to here is that I was raised Catholic. So every couple of months, there's a tradition of going into a cubicle somewhere. Well, they don't call it a cubicle. It's something else, which I've forgotten. And I tell the old man how I thought about it naked person, or I touched myself, or I swore at my brother 3 times. And, I give my penance to get right with God. And we could have a whole show probably unpacking, that pattern.
Yeah.
But one of the things that paired with other parts of my development as a child, really, there was a lack of emphasis of something specific, which is about, first of all, my natural development, healthy feelings and experiences that you might have. You start exploring, as you grow up. You enter a phase where sexuality kind of comes online, and maybe you have an interest in someone in your class or someone in the neighborhood. And these natural experiences that we have, there isn't really a lot of guiding or mentoring. So we do, fumble our way forward. We might be mainly educated, as you're saying, by media or pornography, and we can be missing a lot about what's true. And for me, I think based on my childhood, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on my needs or what I want, not just sexually, but in terms of life. So one of the things that, Alissa and I have explored together, at least one of my patterns, is like answering this question about, oh, what do I want? Or what do I like? Or what do I need?
Mm.
Because my world was actually very, me. I just do things for myself. I entertain myself. I take care of myself. And maybe I can't rely on other people for my emotional needs. So, I can fall in love with her, get into a relationship with her, want to be close with her, want to make love to her, and then also feel stuck because I'm part of the system,
Yeah.
I can be a mystery to her sometimes when I'm maybe stuck, like you're saying, like, I don't know exactly what to say or what to ask for, and might feel frustrated. And I'm just sharing that personally because I think a lot of people would relate to what you were saying about that pattern. I thought you really described it quite well.
And you're both mentioning, I don't really know what I need or want erotically necessarily. That's everybody at times. So,
Yeah.
And if you do really know, you're probably on your way to a good sexual rut that you need some support to
You're on your way
get
to your
out
next
of,
rut.
right? Because it's a process. Living is a process. Eroticism is an emerging process within this possibility, and the I. What do I need? That is a big piece, and that's part of what somatic work. By dropping into the body, people start to get a sense of what I, as a living being in an erotic body, might be potentially interested in, or what might give me pleasure. So there's the I in the system, but I need to equally focus on you. What do you want, and what do you need? And I need to equally focus on we. What do we want? What do we need? What does the relationship want and need? And we get very wonky about this. Either I'm more focused on your needs and not on mine, or I'm more focused on my needs and not on yours. That's that kind of transactional part of the cultures that we live in. But to live successfully in relationship, I think we really need to horizontalize, make equally important, and I need to be really, really caring for and curious about what do I need, what do you need, and what do we need.
Yeah, beautiful. Deej, one thing I'm wondering is, you have all this training, all this experience, and you can speak so well to the questions that you're asked. I'm wondering if there's something from your world that is really percolating for you, something that is fresh or interesting or just top of mind as you're teaching, as you're working with clients and your students, if there's a particular subject matter that you have a lot of energy on right now.
Things are changing all the time, right? Particularly with both with clients and with students. I'm in the process of showing up and getting curious about what's here, what are we experiencing. So things are changing all the time. I think my current passion is supporting people in showing up and giving a shit. And so by showing up, I mean just be present. Don't just be there thinking, or don't be not thinking. Don't be on your screens. Get into your body. Be in this experience of being alive and care about your experience of being alive and the environment and the planet around us and the humans that are there. And in relationship, when we really show up and give a shit, when we show up and care, I think that's really those are the essential ingredients. So with practitioners, it's not so much about do A or do B or do C or follow this process. It's show up, be present, attend, connect, care, be curious, be intentional. Like, what are we here for? What are we working on? And useful things will happen.
I just see how that all translates just perfectly into what we were just talking about with long-term couples who are maybe looking to turn towards their sex life or feeling stuck. All those things you just shared, Deej, I feel like just apply perfectly because couples lose the presence, lose the curiosity, lose the intentionality with each other and with themselves. And it's just so well put because I see how that gets lost after that limerence phase and that can translate to being frustrated sexually.
Yeah, exactly. And that intentionality, we advocate for couples to create a practice space in their relationship, and we use the analogy of a concert musician sometimes, the difference between the practice space and the concerto space. In this sexual myth that we just show up erotically and sex is all wonderful, we're just imagining we can have sexual concertos, sexual magic, without putting the practice in. And we need that intentional space where it's not about actually getting our game on and making magic and it being beautiful. It's the learning space. It's the space to get curious about what is, what isn't, what's working, what's not working, and what can we experiment with, what can we explore to further get what we want, whether that's pleasure or connection or intimacy or whatever it happens to be that we're wanting, that we're feeling is perhaps not present enough. And it's not just that it's not present enough. Without that intentional practice space, things inevitably are going to kind
of. So you're suggesting, you're suggesting that couples actually create time to sexually practice and explore together.
Yeah, and look, the beginning part is probably to create time to let's just talk about it. What's going on? Not talk about it as an opportunity to just blame you for my frustration about what I'm not getting. But actually, okay, what is going on? What am I experiencing? What are you experiencing with that attitude of curiosity? So we can discover and then we can experiment with what might be the practices and possibilities that move us towards what we want. We're not going to know what we want if we're not talking about what we want.
So when you're sharing about this idea of a practice space for couples that don't do this, who don't have an intentional practice, one of the qualities, at least that I'm picking up on here, Deej, is literally getting together in a room, having a conversation where things are slowed down. You're maybe dropping in, as we might say, without distractions and without phones, to have a real authentic conversation about what's present, what do we want more of, or what am I yearning for? Or, I really want to clear this with you. I feel incomplete about this thing that happened, actually giving ourselves an opportunity to get to know each other on a deeper level. And I wonder if there's other pieces or qualities or characteristics that you feel might be important to that sort of intentional space setting.
So it's the dropping in bit as well, learning to bring in the embodiment, it's because it's not just what we think and what we say based on what we think. We've got to bring in what we're feeling what we're experiencing. And when we're talking about eroticism, we also need to talk about arousal, and we can't just talk about arousal without feeling arousal, or it's just going to be hypothetical. It's not going to be based on where my arousal is. So it's going on those journeys of discovery. And because we live in a world that hasn't had this opportunity until recently, hasn't had opportunity for, really useful guidance and forums where we can communicate about sex and eroticism. There's so much more now than there used to be. So that's exciting. People don't have to assume that they're supposed to know how to have these conversations or supposed to know how to check in with their bodies and work out what arousal feels like, what regulation feels like, what pleasure feels like, what shame feels like. It's something that's valuable to connect with practitioners for and learn how to do this.
And Deej, I'm curious if you could also maybe speak to some practices. I know it would look different for every couple, but maybe just to give listeners an idea of what a practice might be, like a physical practice.
Give me a topic of what sort of practice are we?
You were saying creating a practice space for couples. So let's say they're wanting to explore more, and maybe they don't even know what that means or looks like. Like, how could they start past the conversation? Or maybe the conversation would really, be a part of that. Maybe the conversation does have to come first.
Yeah, exactly. We need the conversation to get to the practice, which is why I'm having a conversation with you about how to get to the practice. But okay, so what comes to mind? And so, there's all kinds of ways we can explore our eroticism. So sexual styles, I know, Alissa, you know about this. There's a guy called Don Moshe put out this idea of sexual styles that without practice, most humans tend to be more either in sex for sensation or sex for connection, or sex for expression, which is exploring different aspects of self. And so that's often a way that a mismatch in couples, because if I'm in sex for sensation, I kind of want to lie back and bliss out and feel the pleasure. Whereas if you're in more into sex for connection, you're going to wonder where I've gone. Yeah, so there's different focuses. People have different focuses. So those kind of things, finding out what are you in it for? What is sex about for you? And is that the same as your partner, or is that different? And then if it's different, then we can create a practice so you can both learn and grow more with that example. So the person who's more in sex for connection can do all kinds of practices about sensation. So practices, for example, of using touch to explore, not touch to do something specifically, but touch just to be present and feel. So learning to feel. Practices about learning to touch, learning to feel. The person who's into sex for sensation can learn practices about connection. So practices of breathing together, moving together, eye gazing, all kinds of, a lot of the tantric practices are about sex for connection. So does that kind of give a little bit of an idea? You kind of got to know what it is, specifically what's happening, where's the mismatch, and then what's that opportunity, and what can we practice in order to go more deeply into other ways of being.
Yeah, that gives a lot of context. And Deej, just for fun, could you quickly speak to the third style, which is role?
Yes. So, look, I mean, role's kind of my original sexual style. But some people think it means role play, like, dressing up as the nurse or the fireman, but, and that's a teeny part of it. But mostly it's about different aspects of self often come out in our erotic lives that may or may not be as prevalent in other areas of our lives. So maybe, and one that's kind of easy for the mind to get sometimes is, dominant or submissive. Maybe someone's really dominant when they show up erotically, and maybe they're not in other areas of their lives, or maybe someone's really submissive when they show up erotically. But it goes down to all kinds of levels. So initiator Yeah, the person who initiates and the person who waits for the initiation to happen, or the adored and the adorer. Those are quite common aspects of self that come out erotically. And just with those examples, initiator waiting to be initiated, adored, adorer, when we're not aware of these things, they can be delicious sometimes, but they're also the type of things that create frustration in relationship without the awareness about it. So when people start to become aware of how they are showing up erotically, there's a couple of things. People can kind of integrate it more, move through the shame they might potentially be experiencing around that to really more fully own it, but also realize, okay, so there are other aspects of myself that I might bring out, because if I'm just all about being adored, that might be great, but that also, that could be imbalancing as well within the relationship.
Do some of these patterns or roles exist or develop in a person from some experience of their childhood that, like, if I'm always wanted to be adored, that there's a void or a wound there for me, or some part of me that wasn't nurtured or developed along the way?
Yes and no. There's Jack Byram wrote a book called The Erotic Mind, and he puts forward this theory of core erotic themes. And in his theory, that our hottest turn-ons, what really causes hot arousal in us, are often things from early in life, particularly childhood, that were painful, and it's kind of the body's wisdom and in finding a way to transmute early pain into current pleasure. But the body is constantly learning, and it might be childhood, it might be adolescence. But it's often about relationship. There's also with attachment theory, depending how people receive it. Originally, at least, it was that really in infancy we develop our patterns for relationship, but I think we develop them right through life. Like having in adulthood, having someone show up who actually is really present and attentive and curious and boundaried makes a big difference. But so does the opposite. In adulthood, meeting someone who is abusive also really changes our patterns and how we show up to relationships. So I think it's happening all the time, and it's the nature nurture. Some of it just is, and some of it is learned through our life's experiences.
Over the last 10 years, I've been involved in running men's groups on the West Coast here of Canada.
Yeah.
And in my private work with clients and the emails and questionnaires that I get, I hear a lot of women stating that their male partners are resistant to growth and feeling that, I'm not really satisfied in these certain ways. My partner doesn't want to go to therapy. They don't want to go to counseling. And I wonder if there's a generic piece of advice, a general piece of advice you might give to a person, whether they're a woman or otherwise, in a position where they're feeling that resistance from their partner to grow or learn or set up a practice space.
Look, it's perhaps about getting curious about what that resistance feels like, allowing yourself to be feeling that resistance, and then feeling for or reflecting on, what do you want? What do you want for yourself? What do you want for this relationship? And do you want more connection? Do you want more intimacy? Do you want more pleasure? And that's why you go and see a practitioner, because because the possibilities of connection and intimacy and pleasure are kind of endless, but without doing any work on it or any education on it or any learning, it's very, very limited. So a lot of humans are only experiencing a very narrow, very, very narrow range of what they could be experiencing in terms of intimacy and in terms of pleasure. And that's basically because they haven't been a big focus of education. It's not, or even conversation until relatively recently. When it comes to men's work as well, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in Australia, communication and communication and growth just don't gender very male. It's not very. Do you use the word bloke in Canada? It's not very blokey. It's like the less you communicate, the less you are interested in your emotions and the kind of more blokey you are. So there's all these social constructs. There's all this learning that's gone on in our cultures that makes it challenging to take steps and to try stuff that might actually be really exciting and really great and lead to lots more of what you want.
As we're having this conversation, I noticed that your orientation again is, towards the body and what are you experiencing? And that really seems to be part of the essence, or at least the starting point here of somatic work.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an important takeaway for everybody listening, that, this could be a place, whatever challenge you're dealing with, whatever specific situation you've got going on, that, okay, can you, feel into that? And instead of avoiding it or putting your head in the sand or numbing out, that might be a starting place to potential transformation or more pleasure. Exactly. Or more ease at some point.
Yeah. What are you experiencing? It is the basics of somatic work. It's the basis of the kind of somatic philosophical shift too. If we think about the kind of I think, therefore I am, really prioritizes our cognitive capacity. But one of the somatic philosophical modern people was Eugene Gendlin, and he published prolifically about experiencing. That the cognitive assumption is I think, therefore I am, whereas the somatic assumption is I'm experiencing myself living in the world, and then my thoughts and my speaking comes out of my experience of living in the world. But modern humans haven't practiced paying any much attention to their experience of living in the world. So that's a big part of what the somatic work is doing. What are you experiencing?
And so both culturally and in family systems, I can see how that pattern is reinforced. For example, in the family system, it might not be reinforced over time that I'm having my own experience, that I'm having my own subjective experience. And when I go to school, that I'm having my own experience. It might just be sit down, do the test, have you done your homework? And there's an authority saying, this is the experience I want you to have. So it's like every step along the way, I can see how there's a little bit of a split, or just a lack of development of some of our own centers. And as I'm having this conversation with you, I find it funny that, we're narrowing in on sex as if it's like a little compartment or a drawer in the human experience, versus that, like, it just like we are sexual beings.
I love that analogy, because sex has been put away in a little compartment, in a little drawer culturally, right? We haven't, it's like just recently we're getting the drawer out and having a bit of a look at it, and people are going, oh, maybe it's okay to have a look at the sexual part of ourselves and talk about it.
And put it away when the friends come over.
And put it away when the friends come over. But that's happening less. Friends are talking more about their sex lives than used to happen. And that's part of the shift, right? People are just talking about it more and starting to get interested in how do I get more information? How do I grow in this area? How do I learn in this area?
Yeah. Deej, I'm wondering if there's a question that you wish more people would ask in some of these interviews, if there's an inquiry, a specific inquiry, and it might be, again, coming back to, well, what are you experiencing? But is there a question that you wish more people would ask about sex, about pleasure, about their experience of being a human?
I think it is, what am I experiencing and what could I be? What am I experiencing? What are you experiencing? What are we experiencing? And what could we be experiencing? Because it's that moving forwardness, that emergingness, that moving into our potential. That's important, I think, and that's what conversations around sex and embodiment really need to be about.
Yeah, beautiful. Alissa, is there anything that you want to jump in on before we wrap up?
Well, there's actually still lots of things I want to ask Deej, so maybe we need to have Deej on again.
Yeah, we could ask him questions for about 10 hours, but
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the one thing I wanted to ask, I feel like Nick, maybe you already asked this, so I'll ask it, and Deej, if it's the same answer, then you can let me know. But I'm curious what your wish is for people erotically.
I wish that I'm working on. It's not that I wish. I'm working on people connecting more with what they're experiencing, so they can access more pleasure, because and experience ourselves as living beings, and it's essential, because as we desomatize, as we disembody, as we disconnect from our experience of ourselves as living beings, living in this vibrant planet, it becomes easy to objectify ourselves, each other, the planet. And that's a big part of somatic work as well, is that learning to re-experience ourselves as living, vibrant aspects of the social world and the environment around us is essential. We need to start to tap into the body's wisdom so that it can mitigate the mind's power, and we can start living more. We can move towards healthier ways of being with each other and being in the world.
Yeah.
I love the way that you shared that, because there is a real emphasis, I feel, in society that wisdom exists in books, and that it's out there and it's in the library. And your work, it sounds like part of the inquiry, part of the what am I experiencing is, what's the wisdom of the body, and what is my body telling me, or what is it that I want, or what is it
What's
that I
actually
need?
possible now? Or, yeah. And
And when
there's
you
a
say,
lopsidedness, I think, without that, because the mind is powerful, but when it's not embedded in the living experience, that power can go in destructive ways. Whereas when it's embedded in the living experience of being in this body, being part of this planet, there's a balancing potential so that our power can be used in more wise ways, I think.
beautiful.
Yeah, it just makes me think that there's this call for humans to be alive again. And that's sort of what I got from what you said. It's like actually living, being alive in a human body on a
That's
planet.
the wish. Live more, live more, feel more, be alive more. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
So Deej, in closing here, is there anything coming up that you'd like to promote? Is there something you'd like to say about where people can find your work or to learn more about your institute?
Sure. The website is Institute of Somatic Sexology.com, and we're running practitioner trainings through the year. There's a certificate in somatic sex coaching starting in May, and a certificate in sexological bodywork starting in July. So people are interested in learning to be practitioners in this field, which is what we focus on. Institute of Somatic Sexology.com.
Amazing. Alissa,
And
go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to insert myself and just say that I have gone through one of Deej's practitioner trainings, the certificate in somatic sex coaching, and it was everything that I wanted it to be. I highly recommend it. It was so good, I didn't want the training to end. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's important because Alissa, you did a lot of research. So people that are on the maybe outside of this conversation might not know how many referrals you got to Deej's Institute. And there's a lot of great teachers out there, but this is definitely one that we can recommend and that you have personal experience with. So
100%. I actually dropped out of a program and joined this one. So there you go.
Yeah, and we won't be endorsing that other program. So.
No, absolutely not.
Deej, thanks so much for joining us, and maybe we'll have you back on the show in the future.
Yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful connecting with you both.
Oh, thanks, Deej.
See ya.